What is going on, investors? Back again, another stock analysis. Today, we're going to take a look at Costco, ticker symbol COST. This company just reported earnings this past week. We're going to jump into the numbers. We'll jump into a little bit of valuation and take a look, see if we're getting a good price for Costco right now. And then we'll jump into the chart, some interesting stuff happening there. So Costco, very steady performer. We see the 52-week range. A lot of stocks have these big wide range. Now, this is a pretty wide range, but not nearly as wide as especially tech stocks and other stocks, from 271 up to 263. Today, we're sitting at 342. So we're only about $70 above the low. I say only because we've had some wild swings this year. This stock does pay a dividend, $2.80 per year. That's a 0.81% yield. So very small yield, but when we jump into the numbers, you see that this is a dividend that can certainly grow as you hold this stock. So $151 billion market cap, one of the most steady retailers I think you can own, maybe comparable to Walmart as well. Okay, so jump into the financials here. We've got 16 weeks here, 52 weeks. So they give you kind of like a year view here. Now, if you're not familiar with Costco, at least from a financial perspective, most of us are familiar with their business model. They have these big warehouses. They sell stuff kind of in bulk or in big prices, and they tend to have, very low prices. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So our net sales here, we see up really nicely. These are in millions of dollars. So this is up $6 billion just in the last year. And then the 52-week period looks really strong. We're up quite a bit, about $14 billion there in terms of net sales. Now, that's not necessarily the most important thing when it comes to Costco, believe it or not. These membership fees, in my opinion, are the most important thing for Costco. We see we went from about $1 billion up to $1.1 billion just in the last year. That's really nice growth. And you see over the last year, we grew that by about, we'll call that 200 million as well. So that's really nice. So we've got total revenues here. We got 47.5 in the previous period, up to 53.4, call it. And then over the last year, we grew it by about 14. We went from 152.7 up to 166.8, call it. Now, here's the key that you want to understand with Costco. Costco basically charges you to come in and shop for things at almost cost. Take a look. We spent $46.4 billion to make $52.7. So extraordinary low margins. This is one of the most low margin retailers I have ever seen. That is incredibly low margin. Off, this $52 billion, you're clearing just barely $6 billion just on a merchandise cost basis. Okay, now you have to throw in all the employees, all the back office and things like that. That's another $5 billion. So we spent basically $51 billion to make this $53 billion. Notice that our operating income here is at $1.9 billion. That is just slightly over our membership fees. So the way Costco's business model works is they really look to make money on these membership fees, and they raise them 4 or 5% every year. And they basically sell the merchandise to you at a very low margin, a single-digit margin. So it's an interesting business because the customers are happy. They're coming in and getting the best price that they possibly can get on the goods, more than likely. And they pay a small membership fees, which is really what flows to this operating income line. Now, we see the same thing holds true here for the last year. We made 1.5, call it. We had about $1 billion in membership fees, and we spent quite a bit, over about $46 billion to have about $46 billion in sales. The same thing holds true a little bit for the 52-week period. We make a little bit more here on the operating side. We ticked up to $5.4 billion. That compares really favorably to the previous year of $4.7 billion. So really nice. Now flowing down to the net income, we've got 1.4 in this period. That compares to 1.1 in the previous period. We made 3.6 in the previous period. Now we're up to $4 billion in net income for the year. So that's really, really, really solid. And from a balance sheet perspective, everything looks really nice. So we've got this cash in the short term. So we've got about 13 billion in cash, about 28 billion in total current assets. Let's see if we've got a little bit of debt. We've got a little bit of long-term debt here, and that's up from the previous period where we had 5.1. Now we're up to 7.5. But again, we have more than enough cash, just more than enough cash on the balance sheet to wipe out this debt if they wanted to. Not that they really should, because the interest rates are probably incredibly low on that. We see a current portion of long-term debt. Looks like they either paid some of that down or rolled it into long-term debt. Not really sure what they did there. Either way, this is a very, take a look. Total liabilities here are at 36 billion. That includes a lot of like leases and things like that on the buildings, employee stuff. Take a look. We've got 28 billion just in current assets. If you want to include everything else, they've got 55. From a balance sheet perspective, this company is as good as it gets. And look, that's where their financial statements end. They really only show you a balance sheet and they show you a statement of operations. They don't go into cash flows or anything like that with Costco. It's an incredibly easy business to understand. They charge this membership fee to sell you goods at an incredibly great price, and it has worked for a long period of time. Now, let's take a look at valuation, because if you want to get into Costco, I don't necessarily think you could trade the stock if you wanted to. I think if it's more of a long-term holding like a Walmart or some other stocks out there that have been performing for a very, very long period of time. So I think your objective should be you want to buy in at a relatively good valuation. I don't think you don't have to pinch pennies here and really time this perfectly, but you do want to keep in mind that Costco has been hot over the last year or so based on all the health crisis stuff that we've been going to. Their business model feeds right into people wanting to make less trips and buying more at the store, kind of stockpiling stuff, and Costco's a great area for that. Now, I think it's a trend that probably will continue, and it'll probably change people's habits. I don't think this is a trend that's going to go away. I think Costco's business model will be strong, but investors have bid up the stock based on these trends. We see over the last 5 years, I've got a price to sales here. We're currently at, just under 1. We're at 0.91 sales. And so we see traditionally this stock was closer to this 0.6 range. Somewhere in this range, you see that the stock traded for many years down in this range, and we've kind of broken up and above here. I think anywhere between 0.8 and 0.9, anywhere in this range here, you're getting a price to sales basis, which is just fractionally lower than where the stock is. You're probably doing pretty well. Now, from a price to earnings basis, we're at a 37, call it 38 PE at the current moment. We see more traditionally over the last several years, this stock has bounced around between 25 times sales up to 35 times sales. And just like our price to sales ratio, we've kind of bumped up into a new range. Now we're kind of 35 to 40. And I think anywhere in this range, especially if you're holding this for the long term, you believe in the business model, I don't think you're necessarily going to get a bad deal with Costco. Now, with the chart, this is just like an interesting pattern or interesting formation that I saw with Costco. Not that this is like proper technical analysis or anything that really can do you a lot of good, but I just noticed this, and this goes all the way back. This is back in 2016. I've got a weekly chart here of Costco. I just see that this stock makes a trend line, kind of gaps down below, then makes a new trend, comes down below, makes a new uptrend, trades sideways or down a little bit, makes a new uptrend, trades sideways, down. Now we're in this long uptrend. This is one of the longest uptrends that we've actually seen in Costco. This one started back in 2018 and it lasted all the way into the beginning of this year. And then boom, we traded down kind of sideways and now we're back in an uptrend. And so if you want to really time Costco, I don't necessarily think you need to open your position. If you're trying to get into Costco, maybe buy a couple shares. It is a relatively expensive stock. If you're buying this in an IRA where you're limited to, say, $6,000 a year, you're probably only going to buy 1 or 2 shares at a time anyways. So you could open a position, but be very keen. When Costco trades sideways and down or just straight sideways, it tends to be a good time to accumulate the stock, because as we've seen this is just the last 4 years, so this is pretty strong data. When this stock trades sideways to slightly down, it tends to bottom out pretty quickly and move upward. In fact, the largest downswings we saw here, this went from about a 230 stock down to 192. So that's about a $40 range here. So here we saw it went from 322 down to about 280. So it made a $40 drop here as well from a percentage basis. Obviously, those are a little bit different, but so, you know, when this stock makes these big downtrends and kind of goes sideways, that is when I would really want to accumulate this stock. So that's Costco for you. Not a lot going on here. We see that this stock is incredibly healthy. Take a look. They made $9 just in the last year in earnings, $3 in the last quarter. And again, I showed you that they pay $2.80 in dividends. That's what they make. They make more than that just in a quarter. So this is a company that you can hold for the long term. I think this dividend will continue to grow. They could, quite frankly, afford to pay double that, and they probably wouldn't have any problems meeting any of their financial obligations. So that's Costco. Highly recommend this stock. I showed you some areas where you might want to accumulate. It's probably a little expensive from a historical basis, but this is a solid company, and I think their business model is rock solid as well. There you go. There's Costco for you. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Got some exciting stuff coming this week. I'll post a video early next week telling you about that. Thanks again. Good luck with your investments.